So to get started, I mean, why did you choose this path of academia? Was this something that you always wanted as a journey to undertake?
It was it was by sheer accident. Um, I'd come to the US in 1982 to do my MBA at Arizona State, and the whole idea was that I would finish up my MBA and go back home and help run our family movie theater and some other businesses we had. It was furthest from my mind to do a PhD. Uh, what happened was during probably the second semester of my MBA program, my graduate advisor asked if I'd go for lunch with him and a couple of our other professors. And at lunch, they said, look, we've been chatting amongst ourselves, and based on everything we see, we think you'd be a terrific candidate to do a PhD. And I was quite surprised by that. And so decided to think about it. And really the motivation to do my PhD was very, from an Indian perspective, you'll understand this. I have three sisters, all of whom are doctors. My mother's a doctor. And so I just, more out of probably misplaced ego, I said, well, my sisters they're called doctors, I too should be called a doctor. And so I said, well, let me think about it. And actually, around that time, I was taking a course on industrial marketing, and there was a case in that we were discussing in class, and the case involved, to put it directly, the use of the fact that when you don't measure performance, it doesn't get done well, and when you don't reward performance, it never gets done. And that struck a chord with me because that was something we were facing in India then. And I said, well, I'd like to really work on this. And so actually from Arizona State, I moved to Virginia Tech, where there was a professor who was working on this very topic. So that's how I ended up in academia. Now, after my MBA, I interviewed with some companies because that was what everyone was doing. And but my heart wasn't in it, and I didn't follow up on interview requests, etc., because by then I had decided I was going to do my PhD.
It's amazing how competent sisters can make you do a PhD and at some point lead you where you are. But you're absolutely right. I know that feeling. So my
sisters are more competent than I am, so that was
so my youngest sister, she just did her postdoc at Harvard Med, and then now she's a principal scientist with one of the national with the government. And so it's I understand. I know where you are coming from. It's a little tough to have. So thankfully, I did not head down the PhD path, because I think there are enough of them in the family. So I decided I'll stick with the business.
Well, good for you. Good for you.
Thank you so much. And so, I remember reading your previous interview where you spoke about how, it was, how you involved your wife in this decision of transitioning, because you went there, I'm assuming because you had a family business here with the idea that you're going to come back.
Yes.
And then there must have been this challenging period where, you're making significant life decisions. And how did that really go for you? And the reason I'm asking this is, I think quite a few of the students and people who are sort of shifting permanently sort of outside the US for better opportunities, they will sort of face this tug of war. So I'm very curious about how you resolved it.
It was not easy. I had a wife, but I also we had a young son then. And a very, complete social network, family network. And in those days, Allwin, Jelda, I think is too young to even remember. Probably you are too.
Hmm.
But it involved, we had to give up our whole network of family
Yes.
and friends and think about moving here and also starting from scratch, and in those days, what I was saying was there was no WhatsApp, there was no Zoom or anything. So you really had to call. And, the first minute was $3.50 or something like that. And each additional minute was $2. So you could add up a pretty good phone bill really quickly. So there was no time for arguments or anything. And the only way to communicate was through letters. Uh, and but we very quickly talked about it, and my wife, I give her credit for it. She said she had seen my work style in India, and she was convinced that if I went the way I did, I was going in India, that it was not good for us, and so she just said, Raghu, I think we're going to have to struggle for a few years, but I think for both of us and for our kid and for our one son, it'll be good if we try out the US. And so she joined me after I joined the PhD program in 1984. Uh, and even then, we were in two minds whether to go back after I finished, saying, "Well, I've done it." And so, and as a consequence, we had another son when she came here, and I finished my MBA and PhD together literally in 3 years and 9 months, because I just was going at rocket speed with the whole idea that I would go back. And I said, well, if I was going to go back, I might as well finish up soon and go back.
Okay, sir. Got that. So, so a quick question on your sort of, how do you define, leadership and success for you? And then how do you see that those values reflect in the evolution of the MBA program at Elon?
Yeah, so for me, success is very, very simply being able to sleep peacefully at night. And of course that goes, a lot of things go into that. A simple rule for me in terms of leadership is that I treat people the way I want to be treated. And so that's always been the case for me. I'm very upfront with people. I don't make any side deals with anyone. And people, after a while, they know that, if you go talk to Raghu, there's a certain process for it. One of my department chairs last year, after he got his merit raise, came to me and he said, we've had a lot of arguments this past year, and I really didn't think I was going to get this merit raise, so thank you. And I said, look, we have the same goals. Now we can argue about it, but I have to reward you based on your performance, not whether you argue with me or not. So I think once you get the reputation of being a straightforward person, people believe you, and to me that is the most important thing. That people say he's honest, and if they think you're honest, you have it easy. If you don't, then they start feeling, well, what's he going to say to different kinds of people? Now, with regard to the MBA, I'd like to just take a step back and distinguish between three types of MBA. One is the full-time MBA, which is most common in India also. But what I see is evolving is two other kinds of MBAs. One is the executive MBA, which is for seasoned business executives, and that typically tends to happen on the weekends and intermittently, but it draws from a different segment. And then the third kind is the part-time MBA, which is where students are working during the day, and then take courses in the evening to fulfill their career and education goals. And I think the difference between the three of them is the ones who are doing the full-time MBA are doing that to essentially propel their careers. They want better jobs. They want different kinds of jobs. They may choose to change their industry sectors, so they go get the MBA. The part-time MBA students and the executive MBA students, typically they're not career changers. They are what I would call career advancers. They're looking to get their MBA usually with the financial help of their companies, and hence they get sponsorships. And then they go back to the company and they're working. And while they're working, they're earning. And what I see is gradually, as the Indian market begins to mature, you're going to see schools essentially say there's a market in here for those kinds of MBAs too.
Right. So when you're looking at these three types of programs, how do you bring in the online element? I mean, so as we are seeing a proliferation of hybrid programs as well. So do you have purely online MBA programs? What was your what are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so I think the key is to realize that if you're doing, and you were mentioning about COVID earlier, Allwin, and during COVID, a lot of schools, including ours, for the first 3 to 4 months when everybody was scared, we went online. What we learned very quickly is the skill sets that make, let's say, you or Jelda or me a terrific teacher in a face-to-face interaction with the class are not the same when you do it online. So the skill set is something where you'll have to adapt your lecture materials. If you're discussing a case, you'll have to adapt the case discussions, and because you can't see people, and you don't know about their reactions, and you don't know how they're feeling about something. And we realized very quickly that if you were to take someone who's a terrific teacher in class and tell them, well, teach online, without an investment being made in helping them develop a skill set for online teaching. And the other part is universities will have to spend a lot of resources on the platform for online education, and also it's much more than Zoom, clearly, and you need instructional technologists who at the back end can help both the professors and the students, so that if I'm saying, hey, look at this reading, they can quickly go to the syllabus. There's a link to it, and they can pull it up, etc. And so one of the things we realized is most schools that did like us, that essentially went from face-to-face to online without making those investments, we saw a fair amount of dissatisfaction from students. And now the hybrid option is good, but the main thing is with the hybrid, when the students do come back for the face-to-face classes, there has to be some plan to make sure that they're not just coming in to take a class and go home. You have to, again, because part of the MBA, the wonderful thing about the MBA is students, of course, want the knowledge from the MBA program, but they also want to network with other students. That's the key part. And so what we learned is, it's not enough to say, well, the next 2 weeks we're going to have face-to-face classes, so please come on in and you take classes and go home. That won't do. There has to be a well thought out series of networking opportunities for students. And these could be, because especially we learned this during COVID, it may not be at your premises. You may, if there's a class of 50 students, essentially we would sit down and say, these 10 students live here, these 10 students live close by here, and you'd break it up, and then you'd organize get-togethers for them there. You see, so there's some planning that needs to get done. And that is, I think, the best MBA programs, including your alma mater, they do a good job at this. There's a staff that really sits down and plans for it and all of that. Most of the time, when you don't plan for that and you don't build the capacity to do it, you're not going to do a good job at it.
Well said, sir. So, can you talk about your specific experience, during COVID and your key learnings that now allows you to decide as to how these programs will look like for your institution?
Sure. One of the things we learned is in the case of Elon University, the basic thing that our senior administration had to decide is, are we going to make the investments in online technology? For instance, it's not enough to have a camera in a classroom. You need a studio.
Yep.
You need a studio. You need equipment where you can see all the students and all of that. And I've seen those classrooms, but that's not cheap. You need to build bandwidth to make sure that there are no glitches and all of that. And so one of the things we said was, are we willing to make that investment? Okay, and we quickly realized that that investment was not a high priority for our senior administrators. And so we said, okay, we'll at best we'll do hybrid, where some weeks, and actually even that failed, because we found most of our students are what I call executive MBA, part-time MBA students, and they said, we like coming to class. If we wanted to do online MBA, we could have gone to one of the other programs. So we just said, part of it is, you say, well, what is the market you're trying to reach? And what is the best way to differentiate your offering from your competitors' offerings? And so over time, we said, okay, our competitive differentiation is we are full-time face-to-face.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it.
And it is so it is for students who are willing to make that, who want that. If someone says, well, I want online, well, there's online for it.
Got that. So how many students are you, graduate students do you accept in your MBA program?
The MBA is one where, and I'll take the blame for this, but I've been fairly insistent that a student in the MBA program needs some experience before they come in. I myself did my MBA after working for 6 years. So I feel, and I used to see students fresh from undergraduate, and they're very smart, nothing to take away from them, but they don't have much to offer simply because you're in a case discussion and you're saying, what can I learn from this person? And the reality is it's a different thing. And so we've held firm that for the MBA at least, we want at least 2 years of experience before they can apply.
Got it. And how many students are you admitting every year?
I'd say during the year, we admit maybe about 100 students.
Got it. So I remember reading that you had made massive overhaul in the curriculum in your previous stint while I think you were at Allwin and Babson, right? And so and that's a very strong entrepreneurial school, right? I mean, entrepreneurship is a significant thing for them. So as you sort of take that experiences, in Elon, how have you made changes, and how do you, what are the changes that you're proposing to the MBA program?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges that an MBA program actually faces is what I call the rapid commoditization of the MBA. Every MBA seems the same because the coursework seems the same. Everybody uses the same language. We are very collaborative, and our instructors are fantastic, our students are fantastic, etc., etc. So a student who's looking at it is going to say, well, okay, everybody pretty much, it looks like everybody went to the same printer. How is it different? And so in our case, what we've done is, I think for any MBA program, is to look at themselves and say, what are we good at? Okay. And so one of the things we've really focused on for us, for our MBA program, is we said our students like networking. Our students, and Elon is good for that. Elon is good for, it's internationally known for study abroad. We are number one in the country for that. We are very well known for bringing in executives into the classroom. So essentially, we chose those, and then we said our curriculum has to reflect what we really believe about a curriculum. And one of the things is, and I said this in my last interview, I'm a firm believer in the value of the liberal arts. And so, we sought to include what I'd say more liberal arts type of coursework in the program. And I put it in the context of there's more qualitative types of decision-making opportunities in the program. It's not that we've lessened the importance of quantitative learning, but what we find is once students start working and after the first job, the other jobs are really about how you work with people, how you manage people, and your technical competence is kind of assumed. And so, and if you're going to educate leaders, what you need to do is help your leaders articulate a vision, help them then convince people about that other vision. And so we focus a lot on getting students to present and being able to defend their views in front of other students, etc. So that is the evolution that we've taken. And one of the things we have realized is, in terms of scale, we cannot do it if we have 500 students. We just said, our classes tend to be small. For our MBA classes, we don't have maybe 20 or 25 students per class. And the reason is because of the things I just told you. It's tough for a professor to do those kinds of things if there are 50 students in class.
Got that. So say, what do you feel are like are 2 or 3 things that you feel that you should now, that you feel like changing in the curriculum or in the teaching mechanism based on your experience over the last couple of decades? What are those 2, 3 things that you feel like, that the program should not be left behind in, and maybe it's time to make those fundamental changes?
We live in a world where data seems to be everything. And certainly, everybody, I hear presentations from our students, and they basically, the gist of which is, the data says this, so we should do it. And I think that is, I tell them that is the wrong way to go. The data give us some indication, but we have to be able to use our judgment. And if not, you can as well have a computer, right? It's like an Excel file saying, if it's greater than 1, do this. If it's less than 1, do something else. And I tell students, we need to really think about what our strategy is. And sometimes, even if we believe so much in the data, we are in effect saying the data is perfect, and there is no perfect data. And so I think we need to teach in the MBA program the willingness for students to actually rely on their judgment and their experience rather than just rely on the data. That is one. I'm increasingly of the belief that we need to teach our students what it needs to be entrepreneurial. And by that, Allwin, I'm not suggesting that students should go start companies, okay? What I'm suggesting is you can be working in a company, but still be very entrepreneurial. That is, look for opportunities to make things better. Look for ways in which you can cut costs or increase profits for your company. You can keep thinking about it rather than saying, well, they asked me to do this, I'm just going to do that. Okay. And the third, I think, is students need to really have a global mindset. This is so important, whether we believe it or not. We live in a globalized, the economies of the world are globalized. Now, people's thinking is localized. And so the challenge for us is, how do we, the old saying, how do we continue to think global and act local? And to the extent that we can do it and we can teach our students to do it, we'll be successful.
So that's a very interesting segue to the next question I had, which was around the fact that today a lot of companies like Tesla and are saying that they don't want to hire MBAs. But if you sort of dig deeper into the statement, what they're effectively in some sense saying is that we don't want people here who are just going to manage people, but who are going to get work done.
Yes.
And so, but this as a sentiment is being now constantly being spoken about by recruiters, saying that they want MBAs to come in and start delivering as soon as they can. What are your thoughts on what's happening in this? And is there something that the institutions need to do, or we are good to go?
Look, we have when we recruit faculty members, and they're all terrific. They come with very specialized skills. There are, I'd say, a vast majority who say, tell me what I need to do, I'll do it. Okay, and they do it really well. And then there are some who do that, but they also say, hey, how can we make this place better? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And they're in my office all the time saying, Raghu, we need to start a center for analytics. Raghu, we need to start a center for financial literacy. And one of my colleagues came to me and said, look, she came to me about 5 years ago. She said, Raghu, I really feel we need to teach our students about the dangers of trafficking. Okay. And she's an economics professor. So there are economic issues to this, but she said, just ethically, I think we should do it. And I said, go do it. You want to start a class? We've actually we've invested in a company that has an app called Saving Jane, and all our students go through it now. But the point is, it's the same thing with the MBA. Okay, you got your MBA, a company hires you. And are you going to say, well, they hired me as a marketing person, I'm just going to worry about, they've given me the territory of Delhi, I'm going to see how I can make Delhi better? Or are you going to say, look, really, I'm a territory manager for Delhi, I'm just going to stick to my work? Or are you going to say, let me really understand my product, how can my product be better? How can my company be better? Do I have any ideas that I can try out with my seniors and try to convince them to make changes in the company? I think companies are looking for people like that, who are what I'd call all in. They're not 8 to 5 people. They're people who are really thinking about the company and saying, because you gave the example of Tesla. Well, and that's what Tesla wants. They want people who are thinking about the company all the time, who are willing to really push the boundaries for the company. And if somebody says, well, I'm going to come in at 8, I'm going to go home at 5, switch off my phone, not worry about it, you won't last long.
Very interesting that you mentioned this professor who wants to teach about trafficking. And I love the fact that you decided to make that happen, because even in your background, you've written a lot of papers around cross-cultural ethics and performance evaluation.
Yeah.
Now, we sort of also live in a world which very recently is it's very tough to be politically incorrect. So in this sort of a scenario, what are sort of some of the things that you feel are how are you sharing your insights on this to your students, so that they can maximize the performance, their own performance, and the performance of their teams?
What I tell my students is, you take the issue of diversity, okay? We are all in on diversity. Of course, we have to be. There's no second thought about it. And we have to respect the rights of everybody, no matter how different, to have a good life, right? It doesn't matter. They could be different races. They could be different genders, LGBTQIA. It's immaterial, okay? And so what I tell my students, what I tell my colleagues is, we are not running for any election. We are not seeking to divide people. As leaders, what do? Our goal is to bring the best from people, right? Everybody should feel they're part of it. And the only way they can feel part of it is if we say, come on into the conversation. And so I think the underlying thing that I really feel is the diversity of thought is really the most important part. If you agree that diversity of thought is very important, and I tell my colleagues all the time, we have people on different parts of the political spectrum, okay, who have different belief sets. And I say, whatever the belief sets are, we are in this school because of a certain mission. We want our students to do well. So if you have your belief sets, go to the election and vote, okay? Mm-hmm. But as long as we are in this campus, all of that is out. Our focus is only on the student, and for our students, we don't care who they are. And so let's agree on this. And my colleagues, to their credit, agree on that. We can disagree on other stuff, but we are all brought together by one goal, and that is we want our students to succeed. So I think as leaders, if we find ways to unite people around a certain commonly held objective, we can succeed. But on the other hand, what politicians do is they seek to divide people. But that's a whole different realm that we don't need to get into.
So, I wanted to check if do you work with Indian business schools regularly or irregularly at some point? Do you teach or do you take classes?
I get more requests than I can handle.
I see.
So I studied in Visakhapatnam, okay, for my MCom.
Okay.
So there's this university called Geetham University.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm scheduled to speak to their students on July 23rd or something.
Okay.
For 1 hour, I have to give a welcome speech to them. Okay. So I do that. I was at Indian Institute of Management, Visakhapatnam in December. So to the extent that I can, I do it. When I was studying in India in the 1980s, you either went to the 3 IIMs or there was XLRI in those days. After that, there was nothing, and that is why I came to the US. But now, when I look at the Indian MBA market, I'm very, very energized. I met the dean from IIM Bodh Gaya in Bihar, right? And it was really so interesting that, they have a whole MBA, but one of the key components is mindfulness, right? And it's so appropriate for a city called Bodh Gaya. And so I think what to me is really heartening is that MBA programs and directors of MBA programs are saying in their own heart, how can we differentiate our MBA program? But more importantly, your MBA strategy could be global, but you have to focus on your local area and say, how do we see ourselves as contributing to the local area? Because that's what's going to be successful.
So when you're sort of in the US, it also allows you this unique opportunity to take a step back and see how some of these institutions are operating. Now, we look at the QS MBA rankings and see only a limited number of Indian schools ever manage to, secure a spot in the top 20s or even the top 50s. So from your perspective, what are the one or two key things that you believe that Indian schools are currently lacking with respect to being more well-known and recognized globally?
I love Indians as a group. We are very conscious of ratings. There's nothing wrong in that, but we are also very impatient. Just think, right? So take your alma mater, take Harvard, etc. They've been in existence for how many years? Hundreds of years. And how old are our top universities? They're not that old. And in the interim, we had to go through something called independence, where we've had to really carve out our own niche and determine in terms of priorities where education stood and all of that. So I'd say, to your question, the schools in India that I've seen are very good. Not all, but many of them are good. They're trying to do the best they can. The ones that at least I mentioned. Can they be better? Yes. Do they want to be better? Yes. Will they be in the QS World rankings? They will, but give it some time.
Okay. Got it. I think people in Visakhapatnam are going to love your response.
No, I think it's the thing is whether it's Visakhapatnam. We've also been to Shiv Nadar University in Noida.
In Noida, got it.
Terrific school, right? And and I think schools such as that, such as these, or in Mumbai, NMIMS, all these are very good schools. And the point is,
it's going to take time. So basically,
it's going to take time, and I think when I see them, I think what I see is, having spoken to the faculty, etc. I think Indian universities have several things going for them. One is they have a wonderful, very driven group of students who want to achieve. You have a lot of now companies that are supporting it and understand that the professionalization of management is important. And you have faculty who are now coming on board. When I was studying, there were no PhDs who taught us. Now you see more and more of that. There are people who are committed to academia.
Right.
And when now, because of the private entities getting into the education sector, there are more resources coming into it. So it'll take some time for all of these to gel. Okay. And, I'd say whether I'm here or not, 15 years from now or so, you'll begin to see the Indian schools rapidly showing up in the QS World Rank.
Okay, got that. So what advice would you give right now in this point in time to any Indian MBA aspirant when it comes to choosing the right school for themselves in the US?
What I'd say is ask yourself what exactly you want from an MBA program. Okay, so the couple things are: do you want to go back after you finish? Do you want to look to see to stay here? Okay. If you want to stay here in the US, look for an MBA program that is STEM certified, because that will give you some options. The second is look for programs that do some research, and look for programs that have a strong connection to local industries. local connections to local companies, because as an international student, uh, your success is going to be in your career services people being able to pick up the phone, calling a local company, and then saying, hey, do you have a spot for this terrific student, but who's on a F1 visa or something? And I think that is really very important. And the third part I'd say is to prefer schools that don't have a large international student population. And that sounds kind of contradictory, Allwin, because I think, if let's say there's 300 students in the MBA program and 150 are from international MBA students, you have a lot of competition. And the career services people have to figure out how to find jobs for 150 students. If you go to a program that, let's say, has 100 students, but only 10 international students, your chances are much better, you see. So I think that is very important. And obviously, cost is critical. Go to a university that you can afford. I am not, of course, now you can borrow money and all of that and do that. And India has a lot of money and people can afford it. But to ask yourself, really, how much am I willing to pay? And if you're going to say, well, are you thinking of it as a cost or an investment? If you think of it as a cost, then go for the lowest cost option. If you're going to think of an investment, yes, if you can get into a Wharton and it's going to cost you 200,000, okay, that's fine. Can you afford it? Yes. Or borrow? Yes. But then there's a investment, there's a return of that investment later on.
Right. So this actually is the perfect segue to the last question I had for you, is that what kind of a student from India do you feel would be a great fit for your MBA program at Elon, and what would be your message to them?
The student from India who chooses to come to Elon should be one who understands that we are not what I would call a brand name school. We are what we are, and if you're looking for a brand name, then there are other schools that are brand names. And I go back to what I said earlier. If you're looking for what can the MBA program do for me, as opposed to what can I learn from the MBA program, if you're in the latter group, you'll have a terrific experience here. You'll have professors who know you by name. You'll have the students who know you by name. There's a lot of things you do with the professors, with the other students, etc. But if you're saying, I want to be able to go around wearing a sweatshirt that says I'm from this university and everybody will say, boy, you're a great fellow, then go to the other school. So I'd say a lot of times it is, what do you want from it?
Okay, I think that's a fantastic point to end our interview on. I did have one question I forgot to add here. So sort of when I'm speaking to academics now, I'm realizing that ChatGPT is putting a huge challenge with respect to homeworks, and so there is still no clear-cut way that everybody's dealing with this. So what are your thoughts on what's happening with assignments, with homeworks, and with sort of AI coming in this world right now?
Yeah, so we have, in fact, I gave about, I think we gave 6 or 7 grants for my faculty to incorporate generative artificial intelligence into their classes.
Okay.
But I'll give you an example of how I teach. I teach a course in management consulting to our honors students, undergraduate students. And, we do cases, right? You've done your share. And you give them a case about company X, and, imagine a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, typical 22-year-old, who really has no work experience. And they're saying, well, the company should do this and the company should do that. And I say, guys, I really don't care what you think, okay? you're 22 years old, man. First, get some experience. But what I tell them is, what questions do you have? Imagine I'm your CEO and I call you and I said, XYZ, what should we do? What questions will you ask me? And so I think we call it critical thinking 2.0. But the kinds of questions that you ask are going to determine the kinds of answers you get. And so I have this with ChatGPT. I have ChatGPT on my phone. And if I ask it stupid questions, I get stupid answers. If I ask it good questions, very pointed questions, it gives me really good answers. So to the example, recently one of my friends in India, my childhood friends, it was his birthday, and everybody was wishing him happy birthday, Allwin, happy birthday, Allwin. And I saw 15 WhatsApp messages said happy birthday, and I got bored. I said, let me see if I can get ChatGPT to do this. I said, write a birthday message for Allwin, who's an old friend of mine. He's very gracious. He's very kind. He's always there for us. He's always smiling and so on. So there were a lot of descriptors.
Got it.
And ChatGPT gave me one terrific message, birthday message, okay, which I copied and then put on WhatsApp. And I said, so here all of us are saying happy birthday, but here's what ChatGPT says. I didn't take credit for it.
Okay.
So, and after that, everybody gave up, So, but the thing is, so the question to your question is, I think what ChatGPT does is it has a lot of information, but you have to know how to get that information.
Are you afraid of academic rigor being affected by LLMs like ChatGPT?
If as a professor, I ask my students, write an essay on India's economic development, okay? And the students use ChatGPT, okay? I don't blame the student. I blame the professor. The thing is, I think we have to force our students to really. So what I would say is, if I was writing that assignment, I tell my students, you know what 20 questions will you have about India's economic development? Okay. So they have to think through the questions.
So in some way, you're putting the ball back into the court of educators. What you're saying is that you have to evolve your questions as well, and what you're asking from students as well, so that it's not as easily found anywhere. So let's have more critical thinking incorporated into the assignment itself.
Right. You see, because I think the wonderful thing that generative artificial intelligence is going to do is it's going to make students co-creators of knowledge.
Right.
Okay. And so in that respect, we have to teach our students to ask the questions, and I think that developing that mindset is going to be so important, because when they go to work, they have to keep asking questions. Why can't we make this better? Why is this cost this way? Why is that customer not happy? This is what's going to result in better companies.
And so I hope that the future world belongs to the best question askers, if you will, because when people ask questions, you really know where they're coming from, and hopefully you might get a phenomenal answer. And in this interview, I've gotten some really fabulous answers from you. And thank you so very much, Dr. Raghu, for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Allwin, and thank you, Jirga, for setting it up.
Thank you so very much.